And we are live. Hey, what's up, y'all? You are now tuned into the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast, where we talk about all things related to life lessons, mental health, the culture, and the faith community. So today I have a very special guest. Welcome to my studio, Kizzle or Kofi, whichever one you prefer. Just joking because this ain't a real studio, but
no, absolutely.
welcome.
We were, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. We were actually joking about how you fake do have a studio setup going on here, but you can keep it modest, but you kind of do got a studio setup going on. Yeah.
Well, according to Kizzle, then I'll take that compliment. So I'm gonna just call it a studio for the rest of the podcast. Then.
Yes.
Perfect. So Kizzle, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I always call myself a mental health advocate. And I am the founder of Express Yourself Blackman, which is a community of healing focused on Black people, but with a specific focus on Black men. And so what I'm doing is I'm leading with vulnerability. And what that means is I'm talking about experiences that we don't normally speak about as Black men, like getting cheated on, love, relationships, breakups, depression, suicidal ideations, mental health, therapy, all of these different topics in hopes of creating a community of healing and in hopes of getting other Black men to speak up about their experiences and open up so that we're not just internalizing all of this stress and trauma. And so I do that primarily on social media. So on IG, we have a growing community of over 56,000 people, TikTok over 1K, YouTube over 1K, and also a podcast, all these different avenues trying to reach the community. So I'm very, very, very passionate about creating solutions. So I think about it as solution-based thinking. So rather than just always talking about these things and creating more stress and problems for our community, I try to create solutions. So I lead with vulnerability, but I also lead by trying to create solutions based on things that have worked for me. So I would definitely consider myself as a mental health advocate and someone that's trying to create a better Black community, because eventually I'm going to have little Black kids and I want them to be able to inherit something better than what it is that was given to me. So that's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
The fact that you said trying, like I'm trying to make a difference, I'm trying to do all these things, like you're doing it. And we see it. We see the work. We see the effort. If you're not following Express Yourself Blackman on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, you need to do that like right now, because you bless so many people with your platform, and I think it's needed. I think we're coming to a state where Black men are becoming more comfortable with vulnerability. And you said you lead with vulnerability. Can you kind of explain to us what that looks like?
Yeah, so I always call it leading with vulnerability. And I coined that term. So if you ever hear anybody say it, right, just know, listen, I'm the first person that you've heard say it. Okay, so what leading
So
with,
he said give him his credit, basically. He said give him his credit.
Absolutely. Leading with vulnerability is something that I've noticed works very, very well in the Black mental health space, specifically with Black men. And so I'll speak about when I used to run these clubhouse rooms. They weren't group therapy, but I think about it as like a group session or a group therapy session. And we would do it on Sundays. We used to have a clubhouse chat, maybe about like 10 to 15 Black men or Black people in general, but mostly Black men in there. And we would have a topic, right? And so we would talk about maybe like depression or whatever the case may be, right? And so I would start off by saying, yeah, man. So in 2017, I was super depressed, and this is how I felt, and this is what was going on in my life, and this is how I kind of dealt with it. We can go around the room, and if you feel like opening up and talking about an experience in which you were depressed, you can, but you don't have to, right? And so I would lead with vulnerability and open up the floor by saying, this is something that I dealt with. Have you dealt with it? If so, do you want to talk about it? If not, you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
And what would happen is most of the times, 100% of the people would express what they were dealing with and like how they dealt with depression and how they dealt with the suicidal ideations or anxiety or a bad breakup or whatever the case may be. And it has this like effect where everybody feels more comfortable once they hear that they aren't the only one. And so that's what leading with vulnerability does. It creates the community healing effect, because it allows people to realize they're not the only one dealing with that specific experience. So if you go in my comments, I'll post something, right? And I'll say, yo, this is what happened to me. Yo, did y'all have a similar experience? like 45 minutes later, 15 come, yeah, bro, you know, I'm 30 something years old and this is exactly how I feel. Or like, blah, this is going on right now in my life. Or this is how I felt when I was 20 something. And I'm like, dang, like, cause sometimes I post stuff and I don't really know. Like, I'm like, maybe it could just be me. Right. And I'm going out on a limb, just saying like, okay, even if it is just me, I don't really care because I'm comfortable with who I am. Right. But if this helps at least one person, then I'm cool. And so I lead with vulnerability in that way. And I try not to make it so that people feel judged for what they've experienced. And I just talk about it from my experience and just say, this is what I dealt with. Have you guys dealt with it? And overwhelmingly, most of the times, like, people have, and they feel much more comfortable expressing once they know that somebody else has had a similar experience as them.
You're creating like those, I know safe spaces has become like one of those buzzwords in the in the community over the past couple of years, but like, that's real life. Like, you're creating that space for Black men to feel comfortable with talking about some of their lived experiences.
Right. Yeah. And that's the big thing, because we internalize a lot, right? And I realize that that's not helpful for us, man. Like, we lose 2.8 years of our life when we're under heavy stress. I read a study that says that we lose 2.8 years of our life when we're under heavy stress. And that really stuck out to me. I was like, dang, I'm going to lose 2.8 years of my life because I choose not to have an outlet for my stress. Right. And like, I choose to and not necessarily choose, right? Because a lot of us aren't like consciously making that decision, but we are in a sense, right? When we decide not to express how we feel, or choose not to invest in ways to like better our mental wellness and our emotional intelligence, so that we know how to express ourselves healthily. So we're literally losing years of our lives because we choose not to express what's going on, and that just didn't sit right with me, man. Like, and I felt like I had to do something about it for myself, and then also try to help other Black men out of that, man, because like, women live longer than men. So y'all know something. Like, y'all know something, right? And when we really dive deep and think about it a little bit, man, like, I feel like y'all are a lot more comfortable with expressing emotions. Maybe y'all don't have the same, maybe y'all weren't born with the same tools like we were born. Like, what I mean by y'all didn't grow up in a society where y'all were really taught how to express yourselves healthily, just like us, because I have those conversations with women where women say, yeah, I wasn't taught how to express myself either. But what y'all do have is y'all have the room to be able to do so. And we don't have that room. So while y'all don't have the tools to express yourself healthily, y'all do have the room to express yourself healthily when you find out that you need to. We don't have the tools to express ourselves healthily, and we also don't have the room to do so, even when we know we need to.
Wow. But you know, I feel like us as a community, especially, I think generally speaking, like, women, we're more socialized to feel emotion, to express emotion. But like, even in the Black community, right? So I feel like women too, like, we can have a hard time with like feeling and expressing emotion because of those, you know, notions that have been detrimental, like the strong Black woman or what have you.
Yeah. No, you're speaking facts. You're speaking a lot of facts.
So,
no, that's true.
So I'm thinking, like, us as a community, and I'm not gonna, you know, me too this conversation.
No. Yeah, you're adding your experience. Yeah, and that's necessary. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think that, like, as Black women, like, we also have to get to a place of acknowledging that, you know, some of us may not have learned the tools, but it's okay to learn them now in adulthood. I think when we go through life and we normalize these ideas, like this idea of strength, or, you know, just being able to kind of like power through situations, I think that keeps us in places to where we feel like, well, my grandmom did it, my auntie did it, my mom did it, so I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be able to kind of like put this mask on and keep it moving. And, you know, just because it's normalized don't mean that it's adaptive, doesn't mean it's healthy, doesn't mean it's functional.
Right. There's a lot of maladaptive behavior in our community that we think is healthy, that's not healthy. Like, we do a lot of things out of trauma that's not really putting us in a position to win. It's just putting us in a position to perpetuate the cycles that we've seen.
That same cycle, right? That same cycle. So I love that we're talking about this. I think you do great work, especially for Black men, because Black women, like, and I'm going on a tangent here, but I feel like I'm not gonna say we have the resources, but we have the support. We have, shout out to Essence, we got Essence magazine that's targeted toward Black women. We have, like the hashtags Black Girl Magic, Black Girls Rock, that platform, that whole award show. But we don't have like a Black men's platform. And I remember having this conversation with a friend about how like Black men in this country are neglected. There aren't many resources. There aren't many people that's pushing the health and well-being of Black men.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a real thing. That's a real thing. I said this the other day when I was talking about like we see a lot on social media, Black men going viral on podcasts saying a lot of, sometimes it can be distasteful or negative things depending on a person's perspective. And I was saying the reason why we see a lot of these clips is one, because of, these platforms are going to promote whatever they feel like is going to get the most engagement, but also because a lot of Black men don't feel like they have any other space to express themselves outside of a podcast. And so they get on a podcast and their expression is so raw and unfiltered, and it hasn't really been, they haven't really learned how to express themselves healthily. And so everything comes out like just, you know what I'm saying? Like it's just vomit, right? Like it's just really just them just expressing whatever is on their mind. And so I feel like the part of the reason why we see a lot of that is because a lot of these men, a lot of the men in our community don't feel like they have spaces that are geared towards them and their experiences. And so that's part of what I'm trying to do. There are other platforms that are dedicated to showing like healthy representations of Black men. And while that's important, I think it's equally important to create platforms where Black men feel welcomed and feel like they're catered to, and like they can be at peace. That's something that I've been talking to my consultant about, because we're going to create an exclusive community. And one of the main things that we're trying to do with that exclusive community is create an environment where Black men feel at peace, and where we can have these conversations and grow and actually heal outside of just social media, right? Like we can have a lot of these conversations in community forums. Like I talked about the Clubhouse chats that I used to do. I can't really do that on IG and an IG live. That's not the same setting. And I don't want to be in Clubhouse doing that either, because Clubhouse is just like, I'm just going to have to hop into another app. I don't want to do that. So the solution is to create an exclusive community, exclusive experience where they can have that categorized content where it talks about relationships or depression or suicidal ideations or anxiety or mental health just in general. And then it also has a community forums where we can all get together as a community, maybe on Zoom or whatever the case may be, kind of Zoom format, and have these conversations. And we could also have like low cost therapy in there. We could have medical concierge service so that people can be able to book their own doctor's appointments. They just make a request and then the organization will take care of it for them. So it's about creating these solutions, right? Because we don't have anything like this for Black men right now. We don't. And I want to be part of that change.
Yeah. You're doing it. You say you want to be, you're doing it. You're being a part of that change.
I appreciate that for real.
Yeah. No, so I got a question for you. So oftentimes, like I said, I love that you're targeting Black men. And the fact that you're targeting, you could have just, called your platform Express Yourself Man. Well, you put an emphasis on Express Yourself Black Man. And a lot of times when we kind of emphasize our resources to a specific community, typically it's because like that community is important to us, right? There's usually some sort of moment that kind of like leads up to that. So I'm wondering, like, what was that moment where you realized that you were a Black man, namely a Black man in America?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And the first thing that pops into my head when I think about this is graduating college and then getting into corporate America. And so I went to HBCU. I went to DSU. Yeah.
Wait, what year did you graduate?
I graduated 2018.
Okay. Yeah, I was going.
Okay. All right, cool. All right. We ain't gonna talk about the year, right? But I graduated.
All that matters is that we both Hornets. That's all that matters.
Exactly. Right. So I graduated in 2018, and then I started this job. I worked on an Air Force base in Massachusetts. And anybody that listens to my podcast knows I have a deep dislike, I'll call it, for Massachusetts. And it's because of the 2 years that I spent in Massachusetts.
Wow.
I feel like Massachusetts is like the white version of New York. It's like, I mean, New York is white, right? Because you have a lot of white people, right? But New York is a melting pot. Like, you're going to see a lot of different people in New York. Massachusetts just felt very, 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 very white. And when you think about where I was coming from at HBCU, where I was really in the mix with a lot of Black people, Black culture all around me all the time, it was a culture shock to be in Massachusetts, working in corporate America, having to do a 9 to 5 on
Yeah.
an Air Force base at that,
Yeah.
right? Where they have already this kind of like military or army or whatever culture. And
Mm.
so that's when I really realized that I was a Black man in America. And there's a specific conversation that I remember having with one of my coworkers. He was about, like, for lack of better words, he's kind of like the whitest guy that you can think of. Like when you think about the stereotypical like white, like redneck guy that drives a truck with a long
Wow.
beard and like kind of big belly, drinks beer, that's the kind of guy that I had working with me. And I remember one time he was a cool dude, right? But he came into my cubicle and we were having a conversation and he was just talking about Trump and how he voted for Trump, right? And in that moment, I want to punch him in the face. 'Cause I'm like, why the hell would you vote for Trump? Right. But I'm realizing, like, he's white. Of course he would. He doesn't give a damn about my experiences. He goes
Right.
on to say, I voted for Trump and I thought he would be worse than what he's doing now. But America doesn't even seem that worse off. And that was a moment that I really realized, like, damn, like that's really the only thing I can say. Like, really, I'm really a Black man in America. This is a typical Black experience in like
Yeah.
corporate America, where you have someone that's obviously benefiting from the systemic racism and all the different things that go on in our society and in our culture, and doesn't even understand how detrimental that it has been for me and the people around me, and doesn't I probably and really doesn't even care to hear. You know what I'm saying? Because me in that moment, what if I go and say, yeah, well, I don't really agree with that because this is what's going on in my community, blah blah blah. Maybe it reaches him, maybe it doesn't.
Mhm.
Does he really care that much? You know what I'm saying? And so that
Yeah.
was one of those moments that I really realized, okay, I'm a Black man in America. I can't really respond the way I want to, and I have to be able to um like curb the way I feel about this emotionally in order for me to keep my job.
Isn't that interesting how we have to kind of like conform or kind of like curb our emotions in
Mhm.
order to accommodate somebody else when they're the ones making us feel uncomfortable? We feel like we have to do.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Even if you think
Yeah.
about how we are when we go into work, right? Like a lot of us code switch.
Yeah.
I do that at work all the time. Like 9 to
Really?
5. Yeah, I code switch at work all the time. Like I
Okay.
work a 9 to 5. And I work in corporate America now. I don't work on a in the Air Force base, but when I
Mhm.
go into work, like I'm not gonna say dope. What I'm gonna say is awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like
Wow.
I'm not gonna say hit me up. I'm gonna say ping me. Like it's just certain things that
Yeah.
I switch the way that I speak because I know
Yeah.
it's easier for you to accept me as a Black man when I speak like a white person. You know what I'm saying? And
Whew.
that's really the gist of it. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what code switching is. And a lot of us had to
Yeah.
do that in order for us to in order for us to be accepted, in order for us to be less of a threat, in order for us to keep our positions and provide for our families.
Hmm. Wow. I think one like we saw kind of like a example of that. I don't know if you saw the Kanye documentary yet.
I have seen the whole thing.
You
Yes. We
have.
talked
Okay.
about it. Yes.
Okay. Somebody had pointed out to me, this was before I finished the whole thing, but they pointed out to me like the significant differences between the way Kanye, who's obviously a Black man, how he would talk like at the very early episodes versus how he would talk and more of part 2 and 3 while he was in
Mm,
a group of white people. And like
mm,
we were like literally seeing before our eyes that need to code switch, that need to
mm.
kind of change who he was in environments
Yep.
to present themselves or
Yeah.
present himself. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because part of it is like in a professional environment, you're supposed to present yourself a certain way, right? Like, I mean,
Hmm.
you're not necessarily supposed to go there in shorts. Like, let's say you're doing a presentation or a pitch to a VC to VC to get money for your business. Like,
Hmm.
you're supposed to go in there with a suit, nice cut, all that kind of stuff. But where does it stop, right? Where do we draw that line, right? Because for
Right.
us, part of our culture is the way that we dress, and it's like it's hard for me, especially as a Black man, to
Yeah.
know when that line needs to be drawn. Am I
Right.
doing too much by code switching, or am I doing just enough?
Yeah.
Right? Like, am I doing too much by switching the way I dress, or am I doing just enough? Right. So it's like I understand the difference between the way Kanye spoke in like part 1 and like part 2 and 3, but I also feel like some of that is attributed to him also changing as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Kanye now is not the same Kanye from, when he was coming up in Chicago. He's a lot more, what's the word that I would put on Kanye now? I guess modernized, for lack of better
Okay.
words, right? And him coming out of Chicago, he's raw kid, not really um he was not really on game like how he is now. So I think the way that he moves now, and also like some of his interests and stuff has changed with access that he's had.
For
That
sure.
that money has kind of given him as well. So I think that's part of it too.
Yeah. 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 It definitely can contribute to it. That's interesting. So you feel I know a lot of people saying that share that same mentality that Kanye is like switched a bit.
hmm
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
I think a little bit. I don't think I think Kanye is Kanye, but I think some of his interests have. When I say interests, I mean like, I don't know, because now when I think about like him when he was younger, he was always talking about how he wanted to be like a fashion icon and all these different things. And now he's just living in that reality, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't know if his interests have necessarily changed, or if he's just become more of who he wanted to be. It could be that his interests have changed, or he's just
Okay.
become more of who he wanted to be. I don't know. I would
Yeah.
have to be around him to really, I would have to
Right.
have
Right.
been with him when he was younger and be with him now to really be able to make that assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point.
hmm
Let me ask you this question. Do you feel
hmm
as though it's more um difficult for Black women? How should I word this question? Like, is it more necessary? Is it deemed more necessary for Black men to code switch as opposed to Black women? And yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. That's interesting. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I think Black people in general are expected to code switch. And I
Yeah.
know there's some white people that are like, well, like when I get into a certain environment, I'm gonna change my language as well, blah, blah, blah. Not to the extent that we do, right?
Right.
Like, not to the extent that we do. Um, I d- I don't want to say that Black men have to do it more than Black women. I think we both have to do it. And I also think the reasons and why we do it are kind of the same too. Because I said the
For
reason
sure.
why I do it is because I want to be seen as less of a threat, less of a
Yeah.
whatever the case may be.
Right.
When you think about Black woman and the tropes that you guys have when it comes to like society in general, it's always, well, the angry Black woman. Like that's something that
Angry. Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
something that I experienced when I worked in the Air Force base. Like
Mm,
we had this Black woman that worked with us, and she was just very strict, right? And everybody was just like, they basically labored her with that angry Black woman trope,
mm,
right? And it was because she knew what she was talking about, and she was unapologetic when she spoke. So she
exactly.
didn't code switch, and she didn't conform, and she didn't like
Yeah.
lay down and bow down to them. And so that made them label her with the angry Black woman trope. And so
Right.
I feel like that's part of the reason why we see code switching on both sides between Black women and Black men. It's like, I don't want to be the person that gets highlighted for, and it's crazy to say it this way, but it's like you don't want to get highlighted for being you don't want to be authentic in your expression or in who you actually are, because you think that that's going to be used against you in some way, shape, or form. So you rather
Yeah.
conform to what everybody's doing in that corporation or organization or whatever the case may be, so that you can just continue to make it to the next day. And it's really just about surviving
Yeah.
in corporate America. And it's sad that we had to do this, but this is part of the reason why diversity and inclusion should expand more to not just recruitment efforts, but actually culture inside of a
Exactly.
company.
Exactly. Exactly.
hmm
Yeah. I agree with you. I think there are probably like different stigmas that we're fighting, which is why so many of us do code switch.
hmm
The reason why I asked you that question about Black men versus Black women was because when you
hmm
were talking about code switching,
hmm
I had an immediate impulse to, talk about my experience with code switching. But then
Please
I
tell me.
paused. But
hmm
then I paused. I'm like, well, I'm going to be sensitive to the fact that it might be completely different.
hmm
Because I acknowledge that there are different hurdles that Black men have to jump over than
Mhm.
Black women. But I will say, I made an intentional effort probably about like 4 years ago
Mm.
to not code switch in my profession
Mm.
anymore.
Mhm.
So the same Dr. Reynolds you get on a podcast is the same Dr. Reynolds you're going to get when I'm teaching a class at the doctorate level. The
Mm.
same Dr. Reynolds that you're going to get where I'm meeting with a client. Even while I was, on residency at, Friends Hospital and at Johns Hopkins or what have you. Like I tried to make
Mm.
sure that I was authentic in the way
Mm.
I constantly presented myself,
Mm.
because I believe that code switching is the term that we are using now, and it's become like, again, one of those buzzwords. But this is not something new to America. Like when we were brought to this country, we were expected as Black Americans, we were expected to have our identity stripped. Right, we were expected to
Mm.
have our identity stripped of who we are in terms of our African ancestry, and to take on the mindset and the mentality of our oppressor in order to assimilate, in order to be like those who we're surrounded with. So as a result, I chose not to. I chose to wear my hair the way I wanted to. I chose to wear my nails the way I wanted to. Did I receive backlash? Were people labeling me? Yes. Were those people white and Black? Yes. But I made, again, a conscious effort not to do that. But also, like, I am completely aware, and this is not to take away from your experience. I'm
No, I
completely
want you
aware
to
that
see
we
it, please.
probably,
No,
yeah,
keep
I
going.
feel like we probably have different experiences as a Black man and a Black woman. And
Mm.
also, I acknowledge like the privilege associated with, I don't call myself light skin or whatever, but being of a lighter complexion, I feel as though that people might deem that differently, as opposed to being someone of a darker complexion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's definitely. I'm glad you pointed that out. That
yeah,
definitely has that. That's not all of it, but that has something to do with it, right? Like when
yeah,
we already know. It's sad that this is what it is in our community, but there's a certain level of colorism, right? Like the darker you are, the
absolutely.
more you're seen as a threat,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And that's
Yeah.
that's what I failed to say that, but I appreciate you for pointing that out.
Yeah, like the
Yeah,
darker you are, the more you're seen as a threat, right? And
exactly.
so I think that could be part of the reason why, but I'm gonna challenge myself. Now that you
Mhm.
said that, right? You've inspired me in a way. I'm gonna challenge myself to not code switch as much, right? It's not gonna
Yeah,
change overnight.
yeah,
But I'm definitely gonna challenge myself because it is stripping my identity, right? And I do want to be authentic in my expression.
yeah,
And that's something that I struggle with, right? Because also part of it I think has to do also with people pleasing, right? Like I struggle with people pleasing.
yeah.
And
Okay.
what you want to do is you don't want people to like look at you a certain way. It's like, what are they
Yeah,
gonna think? How are they gonna think about me if I use the
right,
word dope instead of awesome? You know what I'm saying? Like, how are they gonna think about me if I just use hit me up instead of ping and all these different slang terms that I normally use
right.
with my bros, right? So I think part of it is like me wanting to be cool with everybody and not wanting to be at odds with anybody. And so that also influences my behavior when it comes to work.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I take the easier route, which is code switching, because I don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of having to have a conversation with people. Like a
Yeah,
lot of people at work don't even know that I have express yourself black man. Like they don't even know. Most people I mean, I would say 99% of people at work don't even know that I run the platform. I don't even talk about it, right? Like I don't
wow.
even give them that level of like insight into myself. Like, so it's like, yeah, a lot of that is like also not even feeling part of it also is not feeling comfortable with the people that I work with because,
Hmm.
and I hate to say it this way, but I'm always a little bit wary,
Hmm.
and scared, not, I would say scared, yeah, of working with white people.
Mm.
I'll be honest,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
part of it is like I haven't had a lot of experiences with white people, and the experiences that I have had with white people haven't been the greatest. And so like sometimes that can influence how I approach relationships with white coworkers because I don't know if they're actually my friend or not, or if they're
Hmm.
just cool with me until they can step over me and use me for something. Right. And I hate that
Wow.
that's part of the mindset, but that's part of it. Like, and I don't want people to take that as like I'm racist and I don't want to create relationships with white people. I
Hmm.
do. It's just that I struggle with it, not only because of my own experiences, but also when we talked about on my podcast, post-traumatic slave syndrome, my
Yeah.
experiences, but ancestral trauma and our ancestors' experiences and all those different things, right?
Right.
Like I can't just disregard all of that because I have a nice white coworker that, is cool to me. Like
Yeah.
it's hard, like
Yeah.
it's hard to put all that to the side and just say, yeah, we cool, bro. Like, nah, I don't really know. I don't really know you like that. Even if I
Right.
feel like I know you, I don't really know you. I don't. But with black people, is a little bit different because I feel like we connect on a different level because we know we share the same experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Can we call this podcast episode code switching at work? Like, because I feel
Yeah,
like that's where the, the conversation.
we definitely can. We definitely can. Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm wondering, like, as we even talked about leading with vulnerability and
Mm-hmm.
kind of this is how you say, like, you kind of like lead your community or what have you. I
Mm-hmm.
think that in this space that we were just talking about, fears associated with going to work with white people
Mm-hmm.
and, showing up, fears associated with showing up as your authentic self. I
Mm-hmm.
think that was you in a very vulnerable moment with
Mm-hmm.
the audience and the listeners. And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of people can probably learn from those experiences that you verbalize having.
Absolutely. And that's what it's about, man. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want people to feel like, damn, I'm the only person that's going through this. Like,
Right.
so when I speak about these things, like my expression is very raw right now because I've never really vocalized that that's how I felt about working with white coworkers. I've never actually
Mhm.
made that. I've never actually made that vocal, and part of that is because like I don't want to say anything that can end up putting me at odds with coworkers
Yeah.
and all these different things because I'm worried about protecting mine and making sure that I can provide for me and my family and all that kind of stuff. But there's nothing wrong with me saying that I have a hard time creating relationships with white people. Like
Yeah.
that's what's wrong about that, right?
Hmm.
Like I feel like most black people struggle creating relationships with white people, and that's really at the gist of what I'm saying. And so when I say these things, I'm saying them not only to help myself express and actually understand what's going on internally, but also to allow other people to understand that it's okay for you to have these experiences because other black people have them.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
We got to keep in mind, like, we don't go through these experiences in life as individuals. Like, if one
Right.
person, black person, experienced it, it's likely that our community in general has experienced it. And
Right.
again, like, I'm appreciative of you just being vulnerable in that aspect. You said that was the first time you talked about that.
Yeah, that's the first time I did. Yeah, that's definitely the first time I talked about like my experiences with white coworkers. So
Okay.
this is definitely an exclusive to Paige
Yes.
and Dr. Chanda. So
I've been told I have that effect on people,
yeah,
that I can just make people open up and share. I think that's why I'm in the profession.
yep. Listen, you definitely doing it in this episode. You
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
doing
yeah.
it.
So if I can be transparent, that was my first time talking about, like, even code switching on my perspective.
Hmm.
Um and how, like, because people see, like, the product now, right? Me
Hmm.
as the person who kind of like shows up authentically and thinks I was always like that. But people might not know that I've had moments in life, especially early on in my doctorate program, where I did not, like, go into school with braids. And I never, so I went to school in DC, but I never took the metro wearing a hoodie. I
Mm.
never did, because I
Why?
did not, because in the morning on the metro, it's a bunch of white people who wear business suits and dresses, and they're on the way to work.
Oh,
And I did not want to be labeled. So
really?
on days where I had classes and I had to take the train, I had to take the metro, I wore, like, clothes like I was going to work or what have you. Like, I didn't wear going to class clothes. Like, I would,
Mm.
code switching, right?
Mhm. Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Wow. It's interesting because if I was in that situation where I was going on the train with a bunch of different white people and I was just going to school, I would not give two flying, like I wouldn't even care. But when I'm
Wow.
in the actual setting,
Yeah.
you know
Okay.
what I'm
That
saying?
makes sense.
I'm like, I gotta switch up.
That
Right?
makes
Like
sense.
I have to change. So it's interesting that you had it even before you went into the setting. Cause for me, it's like none of y'all gonna really, I don't care how y'all feel about me
Mhm.
outside of the setting
Right.
because y'all can't. I feel like for me, what it is once it has once I feel like it can actually have an effect on my life
Hmm.
and my livelihood, I get a little uneasy. And then
Yeah.
that's what leads to the code switching because I'm like, I have to code switch in order to survive.
Yeah.
But if I
Yeah.
don't have to code switch in order to survive, I'm like, I don't give a damn. Like if I'm in the train and around a bunch of white people and they don't
Right.
they worried about what I'm wearing, I'm like, I don't care. You know what I'm saying? Like it is what
Right.
it is. And also another thing that I was thinking about too, like I always think about this. I'm like, yo, if my white coworkers saw me outside of work and they didn't even know me, would they say hi to me?
Hmm.
Probably not. Probably not. Like if they saw me in the supermarket with my joggers on and some Yeezys, you know what I'm saying? Like the black man is okay to not be okay hat and the merch, you know, would they say what's up or would they head down, keep walking? Because
Right.
that's a lot of the times that's the experiences I get with white people. There's some cool white people that I see in you know in the environment, but out and about. But a lot of times I get the like I'm not even trying to make eye contact.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So I always think about that too. I'm like, would they even say what's up to me? Like that's something that I
Wow.
think about. That's
Wow.
something I
How?
think about
I
for sure.
mean, huh?
That's something I was just saying. That's something that I think about for sure. It's
Yeah.
not going anywhere, but yeah, that's definitely something that I think about.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate that. Like I said, I think people are probably thinking the same thing, and have
Hmm.
this similar experiences. So, but Kofi, I
Hmm.
appreciate you. Like you literally came, you were vulnerable. Like I can tell this isn't just a slogan that you have, like leading through vulnerability. Like you actually showed up and you did it today during
Hmm.
the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you tell the people where to find you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So y'all can find me at Express Yourself Black Man on Instagram. You can find it on Express Yourself Black Man on TikTok, on YouTube as well. We also have a podcast called Express Yourself Black Man. The website is up. It's expressyourselfblackman.com. I feel like I'm saying
Hey.
Express Yourself Black Man a lot. So yes, that's Express Yourself Black Man on all platforms. We have a lot of different resources when it comes to healing. We have therapy resources. We have an ebook. It has 4 different chapters. One is on depression and suicidal ideation. The other one is on breakups. We have another 2 chapters on anxiety and then also attachment styles. And so what I do in that ebook is I try to break it down into 2 sections in each
Mhm.
chapter. In one part of the chapter, I talk about my story in relation to the chapter subject. So in the depression and suicide ideations chapter, I talk about my experience dealing with depression and suicide ideations. And then I talk about in the second part of the chapter, I talk about how to heal. And so I give a guide and things that I did that helped me to heal when I was dealing with that. And so that book is called From Hurting to Healing, A Black Man's Guide to Feeling. It's an ebook. It's linked in my bio and Instagram. And we
I
also
like
have
that
therapy.
title.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. From Hurting to Healing, A Black Man's Guide to Feeling. So yeah, that ebook is definitely my way of trying to create more resources and embody that solution based thinking. And then also the last thing I want to talk about is the exclusive community. So that is where
Yes.
that's where the platform is moving. It is going to be a subscription based community.
Yes.
It's going to have low cost therapy as part of a partnership that I'm finalizing with a Black organization. And so what that's gonna basically do is it's basically gonna allow us to heal outside of these social media platforms. So
Mm.
that exclusive community will have low cost therapy. It'll have categorized content, so categorized podcast episodes and posts. It'll have community forums. It'll have live podcast episodes as well. It'll have exclusive merch, and then it'll also have a medical concierge service as part of another partnership that I'm working on. And what that basically will be is a Black man will be able to come into that exclusive community, request for a doctor or request for help in their environment or wherever they are. And then the organization will take care of finding them a competent doctor, a competent Black doctor that can help them, a primary care physician, and then they'll book their appointment and it also help pay for transportation there if they need to. So trying to get Black men on all different facets, right? Not just mental health, but also the physical health, right? Because we don't be going to the doctor. I ain't gonna lie, man.
No.
We don't,
No.
right? Like my girl literally got to force me to make my appointment, right? So I know if it's something that I'm struggling with, I know
Yeah.
some of the community members are struggling with it as well.
Oh,
So it's about
absolutely.
it's about creating these solutions and not more problems, man. And meeting the community where they are and offering what they
Exactly.
need.
I love it. Kizzle, you
Hmm.
are definitely a gem. Thank you so much for joining the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast. I hope the viewers, I hope that you guys were taking notes because Kizzle was definitely saying some things that I probably apply to you and your life. I want you to share this podcast with as many people as possible. I want you to tag as many people as you can, especially your Black brothers, cousins, mom, not your mom, your father, everybody who is a Black man and you feel like who needs these services because when is this service opening up, Kizzle?
In a month and some
Okay.
change, yeah.
Okay.
So anybody that's on the Instagram, TikTok, wherever platform you're on, it's gonna be on every platform. I also have
Nice.
a email list. So if you go to expressyourselfblackman.com/therapy, you can sign up for the mailing list to know exactly when it's coming out and get early access
Perfect.
to it. Yep.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you again, Kizzle. For the viewers out there, make sure that you are subscribed to the Paging Dr. Chanda podcast so that you can enjoy more episodes like this one. And don't forget, you have the power to create the emotions that you want to experience. All right, y'all. Catch y'all next Wednesday.